Some of you were no doubt expecting Lester Holt, but I'm actually Paul Revel. I'm a faculty member here at the Harvard Graduate School of Education, director of the Education Redesign Lab, and moderator of this evening's debate, which we are so pleased to welcome all of you to attend and participate in. This first Askwith Forum debate entitled More Charter Schools, the Massachusetts Vote and the National Debate. I'm pleased to welcome District 7 City Councilor Tito Jackson, Massachusetts Charter Public School Association founder and president Mark Kennan, former charter school parent Michael Robinson, and current charter school parent Latasha Sarpy to tonight's Askwith debate. Before I and I have to tell you, we have a record crowd here for this, so we're delighted to have all of you with us. Before I introduce the speakers, I want to say a few words about the Askwith Forum for those who are joining us for the first time. The Askwith Forums bring leaders in the field to our campus to share knowledge and to engage with the community. These forums help strengthen the intellectual life of the school through conversation, debate, and the exchange of ideas. They're also a way to open our doors and welcome members of the greater Harvard community and the general public. Tonight is the inaugural event of the new Askwith Debates series, which will address some key controversies in education and, with any luck, model the ways in which civil disagreement can promote deeper understanding. Last year, nearly 20,000 people joined us on campus and online for 14 Askwith Forums. This year, we have a terrific fall semester lined up. In addition to tonight's debate, we have a number of outstanding panels and speakers, including Jeb Bush, former governor of Florida, Ron Suskind, the author of Life Animated, a book and award-winning documentary that chronicles the life of Ron's autistic son, who found expression through Disney movies. Tonight's event is also part of Hub Week, a civic collaboration between the Boston Globe, Harvard University, MIT, and the Massachusetts General Hospital. Hub Week's mission is to convene, celebrate, and showcase the most creative and inventive minds making an impact in Greater Boston and around the world. Please visit hubweek.org to learn more about other events taking place during this week. Now, if you haven't already done so, now is the time to participate in the poll on ballot question 2, and we'll be putting the results up, so I can see they already are, in real time. Yeah, we're taking the risk here that some people might actually change their minds on the basis of what you hear tonight. So we're going to do a poll before and a poll afterwards and see how it all comes out. Now to our topic. Please bear with me as I take a few moments to set the stage. Imagine the world of public education, if you will, if every family had access to high-quality schools and the capacity to choose the school which was best suited to meet the needs of each of their children. Imagine a universe of high-quality schools operated by mainstream municipal systems, complemented by innovative, specialized, and independent, but publicly funded and accountable charter schools who could serve those seeking alternatives to the mainstream options while supplying competitive pressure on a previously monopolistic system and serving as a set of laboratories for creative new approaches to educating our children. Sounds reasonably good, doesn't it? That's what legislators all over the country tried to accomplish with groundbreaking charter school legislation, which occurred in 43 states and the District of Columbia over the past 2+ decades. Implementation varies widely across the country. Pundits generally assume that Massachusetts is one of the higher performing, most accountable systems of charter schools and having a healthy, high-performance charter sector. But the devil is always in the detail. How would these new charter schools be funded and governed? How would they coexist with mainstream schools? Would the competition be a virtuous cycle of improvement or a battle royale over scarce resources in the education sector? How would these schools be held accountable? Here in Massachusetts, charter schools were authorized through the Education Reform Act of 1993, 2 years after the charter concept was pioneered in Minnesota. In the Commonwealth, the first charter schools began operation in 1995, now more than 2 decades ago. The original authorizing legislation described the multiple purposes of Commonwealth charter schools as follows: to stimulate the development of innovative programs within public education, to provide opportunities for innovative learning and assessments, to provide parents and students with greater options in selecting schools within and outside their school districts, to provide teachers with a vehicle for establishing schools with alternative innovative methods of educational instruction and school structure and management, to encourage performance-based educational programs, to hold teachers and school administrators accountable for students' educational outcomes, and to provide models for replication in other public schools. It wouldn't prove easy to fulfill all these promises simultaneously. From the beginning, the charter school movement has been greeted with fierce opposition, stemming in large measure from the competition with municipal school systems over scarce educational resources. These charter wars, as they have been dubbed, gained disproportionate attention in the media, presenting a David versus Goliath conflict scenario that captivated both journalists and readers. This heated conflict has come to overshadow the field of education, sometimes distracting attention from other vital school improvement conversations. These wars have always come to a head around policy decisions affecting charters and their finance, especially decisions to lift the charter caps, various limits on the number of charter schools permitted. The original legislation capped the growth of charter schools in various ways. For example, limiting the absolute number of Commonwealth charters to 25. At various times since 1993, the caps on charter schools and their enrollment have been lifted. Last school year, 2015 and 16, there were 81 charter schools, including 71 independent Commonwealth charter schools, on which most of our conversation will focus tonight, and 10 Horace Mann in-district charters, for a total enrollment in the Commonwealth of approximately 40,300 students, or 4.28% of Massachusetts' total K-12 student population. We now face another moment in which the Commonwealth, with the eyes of the nation on us, is considering lifting the charter school cap again. The matter is to be decided this time in a referendum vote taken on November 8th. You've already seen the text on the cap lift, which would allow up to 12 new charter schools or expansion authorizations each year, conceivably serving up to 10,000 new students, or 1% of the total Massachusetts student enrollment in charters each year in an expanded variety of communities. We are here tonight to debate the pros and cons of this specific measure, which will be the focus of our conversation, but inevitably our conversation will turn to the merits of, or problems with, charter schools more generally. So that's it for setting the stage. Here's our format. It will be as follows. Each of our 4 panelists has been invited to make an opening statement of up to 4 minutes. Then we will make a second pass through the panel, allowing each panelist 3 minutes for a rebuttal. Then I will spend roughly half an hour raising some questions for the panelists. Then we will turn to you, our online audience, for your questions. We know you'll have a lot of questions, and I do mean questions rather than statements. And we'll ask you to jot those down on cards, which are being distributed, and we're being distributed on the way in, and there'll be people around with cards if you want to raise a question. Later on, we'll collect your index cards and get to as many of them as possible. As your moderator, I would ask you as audience to restrain your reactions, positive and negative, so we can maximize the amount of time our distinguished panelists will have to discuss these complex issues. Now, to the center of the evening, our panelists. Tito Jackson. Tito Jackson is the District 7 counselor representing all of Roxbury and parts of the South End, Dorchester, and Fenway neighborhoods. Councilor Jackson currently serves as chairman of the Boston City Council's Committee on Education. Along with City Councilor Matt O'Malley, Councilor Jackson filed a resolution against the Question 2 vote passed by the state legislature that would allow lawmakers to sanction as many as a dozen new public charter schools annually in districts showing weak performance. Councilor Jackson is an active leader in youth development programs such as Citizen Schools and Anytown, the Leadership Initiative. He sits on the board of multiple organizations, including Heading Home, the Global Citizen Circle, and the Boston Ballet. Counselor Jackson holds a BA in history from the University of New Hampshire. Mark Kennan is our next panelist. Mark founded the Massachusetts Charter Public School Association, of which he is the executive director, in 2001. Representing over 98% of the state's charter schools, the MCPSA provides cutting-edge policy advocacy, promoting dramatic education reform for the 21st century. Kennan has 30 years of experience in managing and conducting educational research and advocacy, and has published research in education policy. Before joining the association, he directed the Student Center for Educational Research and Advocacy at the University of Mass Amherst, where for 7 years he directed research, training, and advocacy on issues of education reform. He received his doctorate in educational policy, research, and administration in 1993 from the University of Massachusetts Amherst. He is the proud parent of 4 charter school graduates from 3 Western Massachusetts charter schools. Michael Robinson is a former charter parent who lives in Mansfield, Massachusetts, with his wife Julie and 3 children, each of whom have been diagnosed with neurological disabilities. He has worked with regular public, charter, and therapeutic school programs as his children's needs have required. 2 of his children attended charter schools for several years. Mike serves as the Board of Directors co-chair for the Massachusetts Tourette Association Massachusetts chapter. He is a software consultant who previously worked as a contractor for the Massachusetts Executive Office of Education. Mike comes from a family of educators and teaches religious education programs, CCD, at his local parish. He holds a BA from the College of the Holy Cross and an MBA from Bentley College. Latasha Sarpy is a charter parent of the Brook Charter Schools. She is an associate professor in the Behavioral Sciences Department at Bunker Hill Community College. Latasha was educated in both the Boston and Brookline public school systems. Aside from working at Bunker Hill, Latasha is also a licensed clinical social worker and the vice president of the Parent Involvement Council at Brook Charter School. She holds a BA in criminal justice and MA in applied sociology from the University of Mass Boston, an MSW from Wheelock College, and is currently finishing a doctoral degree from Northeastern University in law and public policy. So, we will now start our debate, and I'm going to make my way around front here. So we're going to begin with the opening statements from our panelists, and I've invited Mark Kennan to give his opening statement first, and then we will rotate across the panel. Mark?
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, everybody. It's really exciting to be here. So many people here in other auditoriums around us, and that reflects the excitement and interest in this ballot question that is spreading across the state. I personally am having an amazing experience traveling the state talking about this ballot question, and whether you are for it or against it, I feel it's really exciting and important that Massachusetts is having a spirited debate during this election season about, of all issues, education, which nobody else seems to be talking about. So we're very proud of that and happy about that, no matter what the result is. So the fact that all of you are here tonight certainly validates our sense that this is a really critical public conversation that Massachusetts is having. We don't consider it a war, we consider it a great exercise in democracy, and the people of Massachusetts will get to speak on this critical public issue on November 8th. As Paul said, my name is Mark Kennan. I'm the executive director and founder of the Charter School Association. I'm also the chair of the Campaign for Fair Access to Quality Public Schools ballot committee, and one of the co-authors of the charter school ballot question itself. I'd love to answer all your questions tonight. I'd love to stay as long as I can. If you don't get your questions answered tonight, we have quite a road show going on around Massachusetts over the next 6 weeks. Feel free to catch us somewhere else around the state as we continue to have this conversation. So first about me a little bit. I'm a public school guy. I'm not only from K through 12, where I never set foot in a private school, but I have my bachelor's at the University of Michigan and my master's and doctorate at the University of Massachusetts. So K through 22, if you will. I founded the Charter School Association 16 years ago and have served as the primary advocacy voice of what is now 70 Commonwealth schools since then. Our association provides advocacy, government and public relations, professional development, and supports collaborations between our schools and with our district school colleagues. What originally got me interested in the charter school movement 16 years ago was the way the charter schools were pushing the boundaries in the public sector. driving change into what I saw as the belly of the education bureaucracy. And the fact that they were and are public is why I jumped in head first. And this is still the core of the debate today. Are these schools public? Really, this whole question hinges on that very simple question. Because if the answer to that question is yes, then all these arguments that are being thrown against us go away. We're not taking money away from public education because we are public education. It's publication dollars and students getting reallocated or reallocating themselves among different public schools, just like other schools in the public sector, like voc tech schools. So let me just read you the statute really quickly. I promise I won't read you anything else from this charter school statute tonight. Chapter 71, Section 89, subsection C. Quote, a Commonwealth charter school shall be a public school, comma, operated under a charter granted by the board, which operates independently of a school committee and is managed by a board of trustees. We are public. No matter what anybody can say on TV or anywhere else, we're public. It's the law. You may not like or agree with the kind of public school we are, or the kind of public board of trustees we have, but we're public across the board. But let's talk about the important aspect of our charter schools, which is the academic quality. The debate over academic quality of our schools is actually over. We have won that, and the other side has said as much. This isn't a case of competing studies. There is now not one, but two Harvard/MIT studies, one separate MIT study, and two Stanford University studies, all showing tremendous gains achieved by Massachusetts charter schools. And what does the no on two side bring to this academic debate? A study by Citizens Public Schools, a couple of graphs by some disgruntled BPS parents. And you know what? Our polling is showing that voters agree with us on this. They think very highly of our schools and continue to do so. So 1 minute, just 1 minute in closing. What I think is most important about this issue, though, is the degree of parent support for our schools. A recent poll in Boston that we conducted of parents, not likely voters, parents, found 83% of the population in Boston supported lifting the cap. And I'll talk more about that poll as the evening goes on.
Okay. Thank you, Mark. Jeter, you're up.
Thank you so much, Paul, and I want to thank the audience. I want to thank the Harvard Graduate School of Education, and I want to thank my partner. This is, as being named Tito Jackson, I've always wanted to be partnered with a Michael. So we have Tito and Michael up here, and we're going to make things happen. It is amazing to me that we are actually having this conversation. This is the first time in history that we are talking about taking funding away from existing schools and moving funding to schools that don't even exist yet. That's what we're talking about in question 2. And understand what question 2 is. It is 12 new Commonwealth charter schools each year, every year, anywhere, forever. It doesn't say that in the little book, but I'm going to help you understand that. But that's what is actually being proposed here. And what happens on the financial front is this extracts $450 million from 2/3 of the districts in the whole state of Massachusetts. I actually am chair. We sat through countless number of hearings. Let me tell you what it does in Boston. So we fund public education 2 ways in the city of Boston. One, we actually get money from real estate taxes. Thank you so much, Boston residents. We also get money from the state. We get $215 million from the state of Massachusetts. Actually, we don't get $215 million from the state of Massachusetts. $160 million is taken out of that $215 million and is given to charter schools. In addition, their students ride on Boston public school buses. That costs $15 million. So right off the top of our $215 million, $175 million is extracted. The other $40 million, so they have 8,200 students. We have 57,314 students in the Boston public schools. We serve the most needy students in the city of Boston. We have 4,000 homeless students in the city of Boston. 30% of our population are English language learners. In charters in the city of Boston, 12% are English language learners. Statewide, Districts serve about 24% English language learners. Charters serve about 12% English language learners. In addition, these are not accountable organizations, as was previously brought up. They function with boards. Really interesting, 60% of charter school boards do not have a single parent or student on their board. That doesn't sound like public to me, and it definitely doesn't sound public when one of those schools that's in Boston had their board meeting 2 weeks ago in Dover, Massachusetts. In addition, there is an issue relative to whether or not cities and towns even want charters. Brockton recently was run over. They actually received a charter, but the charter school folks couldn't even get it together in Brockton. What ended up happening was they actually moved it to Norwood, right? Anyone can actually open a charter. These are separate and unequal systems that we actually need to move forward on. It's interesting that Black Lives Matter, NAACP, and the Mass Municipal Association are actually on the same page in stopping the growth of charters. We need to do right by all students. And the #1 state for education in the whole United States of America, Massachusetts. I'm sorry about that. Okay, cool. Massachusetts, 4% of the students go to charters. 96% of students go to public schools and districts. So we are the best, and only 4% of the population is actually in charters. Let's do right by public schools and districts and increase opportunities there. Let's not create a separate and unequal system.
Okay, thank you, Chita. Latasha.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks to Paul Revel, the Askwith Team Debate, and Harvard Grad School of Education for allowing us to have this conversation tonight. And thank you for allowing me the opportunity to be a part of this debate and to share my perspective on the role that charter schools play in our educational landscape. As you've already heard, my name is Latasha Sarpy. I'm a lifelong Dorchester resident, an associate professor, a charter parent, a mother of 2.5, and an advocate for education. What you may also be surprised, considering my position, is that I am a product of 2 great district schools. I have the privilege of teaching at the largest and most diverse community college in Massachusetts. Every day, I realize the obstacles that my students have faced just to walk through the door. Each semester, I reassure them that they made the right decision to enroll in college. I tell them this only because the only guarantee that I know of to changing a person's social mobility in their life is through education. However, as my students begin to develop their sociological imagination, they become angry. They begin to realize that education, like other social institutions, is stratified based on race, income, gender, and zip codes. My students become angry when they realize that their educational experiences are based on their social locations. They become angry when they realize they didn't have a choice. I'm angry as well. I am angry at the fact that 90% of my students enter college testing into developmental math. At the lowest level, students are currently learning long division. The reality is that many of these students have graduated from high school with the assumption that they were college ready, only to waste time and money taking classes that does not count towards their degree. Question 2 asks whether or not charter schools should be allowed to create 12 new schools a year or to expand enrollment of current charters in Massachusetts. I am in full support because I am tired of being angry. You may have heard both sides of the argument about the number of students being served that represent special subgroups, the comparable disciplinary rates, and of course, the funding. But this debate is not about any of those things. This debate is about choice. We can argue back and forth, but both charters and district schools have strengths and challenges. But we also know that some districts have had a long history of dealing with and not being able to fix those challenges. In fact, 20 years ago, my mother faced these problems that we are discussing today. She had to make tough decisions about which educational environment would be best for me. I am so grateful for those tough and demanding conditions, the long bus rides, and sometimes tearful nights that I spent in another district because of the disparity between my zip code and another town's. But then I become angry again, thinking about how 2 decades later, I am still in the fight, but now as a parent. I sit before you to represent the voices of those who have been silenced for too long, to represent the students who are in developmental classes despite meeting all graduation requirements, and to the people in my zip code and others who are still waiting. Education is a right, not a privilege. This is not about charter versus district, it's about quality education. But lifting the cap doesn't hurt those who already have great district schools, but it does help those who are the most vulnerable. We often talk about equity during these debates, but what is equitable is giving our children what they need. And who knows the needs of their children best but the parents? We've been having the same conversation for decades, and another year of waiting is far too long. Parents are angry, we're tired of waiting, and we need action now.
Okay, thank you, Latasha. Michael?
Thank you. Thank you for having me. My name is Mike Robinson. I'm not an educator, and I'm not a teacher. I'm not an expert in educational policy. The success or failure of charter schools in Massachusetts will have no impact on my legacy or economic situation. I do come from a family of educators, and I do teach CCD. Two of my sisters are teachers. My mom taught at Roslindale High School, and my grandfather taught at Boston Latin for 45 years. I did also previously contract with the EOE. I'm here to represent the small population of children who have too silent a voice in the charter school debate. Children with disabilities who are underserved in the conference rooms and marbled hallways where decisions are made by those who are looking at averages that determine educational policy. I'm here because I have a moral obligation to inform others and prevent other trusting parents and voters from repeating our mistake. When we entered the charter lottery, it was because of the lack of early education funding. Our school only had half-day kindergarten, and the charter offered full. When my daughter was selected, we signed her up and my son, who was entering second grade. We were warned by many of our teacher friends that charter schools can be harmful to children with disabilities, but we assumed that they were just angry that the charter schools were taking money away from their district. We should have listened. While on paper, charters are obligated to provide special education services, they are not incented to do so. Even though IDEA affords each child a free and appropriate public education, many of these independent schools see special education as a resource-intensive pit, which depletes funds that they would prefer spend elsewhere. That is why, as long as the focus is on averages, and charters operate without local oversight and accountability, many of these charters will continue to target the weak so the school can appear stronger. If you speak to enough parents, you might observe there's a common formula which many charters use against kids with disabilities, making conditions unbearable so the family withdraws. Our family experienced these tactics firsthand. Teachers modeling humiliation and social alienation, illegal use of restraints, punishment as a lever, and suspension as a trapdoor. Gross understaffing of special education, ignorance and avoidance of special ed law, punitive measures against staff who voice recommendations for supports, and the list goes on. This is why, as long as we focus on averages and charters operate without local oversight, we will continue to have these problems. Looking back, I don't know why we fought as long as we did to keep our kids in that school. But in the end, we realized it was too harmful. Today, both children are still recovering. Our daughter was particularly traumatized, and she spent nearly a year at a therapeutic day school, where she rebuilt her trust and confidence so she could return to a general education setting. Our experience with the home district has been in sharp contrast. Our kids have flourished. The administration, the teachers, the staff have been true partners, full of compassion and commitment, and they have helped our children tremendously. Our son's made friends, and he's made honor roll. He plays football. He's regained confidence. Our daughter has made friends. She plays the piano. She's thrived academically. She had a countdown over the summer for when she could finally get back to school. I oppose question 2 because the current charter model is dangerous. Without implementing permanent oversight and controls that ensure accountability to parents, to the community, and to the children, policies must be enacted to ensure charter schools are in compliance with special education, and ongoing monitoring and bidirectional communications with parents must be in place to protect rights and prevent trauma. We need to understand how charter schools fit into a larger education vision that supports all children in the state. An analysis must be done which does not look at averages alone. Charters are by definition independent, and I believe we need to look at individual schools, individual children, to understand whether the current charter model deserves to be expanded without implementing preventative and corrective controls and safeguards.
Michael,
If I could make just one last sentence.
Okay.
If I could make one last wish, it would be that that my children could have been spared the suffering they endured because we opted for the mirage of school choice. I'm voting number 2 this November, and if you care about vulnerable children in our state, I implore you to do the same.
Okay, we asked for a spirited debate, and we're getting a spirited debate. So we appreciate all the panelists in your opening statements. We're now going to allow for people to make a secondary round of comments, rebutting things you've heard, adding to what you originally said, rounding out the picture before we go to some questions. So Mark, we'll start with you.
Sure. I have to start. I can't not address Michael's comments, and from a parent perspective, it breaks my heart to hear the pain that you're suffering and suffered with your children as parents. There's nothing like that. We all know that. As a parent at 3 charter schools, spent about 36 years as a parent, school years, over 100 high school soccer games and 150 ultimate frisbee games. I've seen special education at a number of our schools firsthand, and I've seen the data. And the experience that Michael is portraying is not the common experience in our schools. And these schools are the most transparent schools in Massachusetts today. All the data about special education, everything you want to know about our schools is on the Department of Education's website. So while we're pained by the experience of any parent that is traumatized by the experience of their children in any public or private school, and we don't diminish that, I have to push back that that is the common thread through Massachusetts charter schools. So what I'd like to, though, upon saying that, I'd like to turn a little bit to the issue of parent demand for our schools, because it's what drives me in this world. And as I mentioned before, we did a poll of parents in Boston. We actually did that because when the NAACP came out as being opposed to the charter cap, it was a little confusing to me. So I asked if we could go out and do a poll of Boston parents. And it's fascinating. And we're going to have a provocative conversation. I have to put out some stuff here because it's really, really important for the city of Boston and the state of Massachusetts. As I mentioned before, the total of our poll of supporting charter schools, I have to come back, was around 62% that supported the ballot question. 83% of people of color supported it. 42% of white parents in Boston supported it. Age 18 to 29-year-old young people, young parents, supported the cap lift, the ballot question, with 86%. People making less than $100,000 a year, 79%. People making more than $100,000 a year, 58%. So we have a movement that's strongest support, and this is in our polling on the ballot question as well. We have the strongest support across the state from Black and Hispanic parents and young parents 18 to 29. And we have our biggest opposition in Boston from white parents. And we have our strongest opposition from the teachers' unions across the state, whose leadership is primarily white. So we have a very complicated dynamic around this right now. But to know that our goal and who we are trying to serve are those Black and brown parents and young parents who are trying desperately to get alternatives for their children.
Thank you, Mark. Tito.
Mark, the leadership of the teachers union is primarily white, but so is the leadership of most charter schools in the city of Boston. And so I think that is a critical component. So let's dig into these waitlist numbers. So there's this mentality that charter schools have so much more of a wait list than public schools. So interesting to actually look at these numbers. So first off, they started with 37,000, now they're down to 32,000. Interestingly, if we were to look at these numbers in Boston Public Schools, what we do is we only let you stay on a wait list for 1 year. They actually extend it back further than that. If we were to do it the way that Boston Public Schools does it, they have 20,141 students on the wait list. And ironically, Boston Public Schools has 20,161 students on the wait list. And it's not only about wait lists, it's actually about who wants to matriculate to the schools. So when you look at BPS for middle school and high school, 75% of students actually accept the seats. So it's not the offer, and I'm sure this is Harvard, so if you get into Harvard, everyone goes. I get that. But in these cases, there are choices that parents make as to whether or not they want to go to a charter school or district school. Interestingly, for charters, only 60% actually accept a middle school seat. 40% of them reject that seat. And then when we look at high schools, only 30% of them accept a seat in charters, and 70% of the seats are rejected. And let me tell you a quick story on this discipline issue. There's a young man named Ajani, and I actually had to sit in on a disciplinary hearing. And his hearing was based on, we got to the school, his mom dragged me there on a holiday. We got to the school, and we said, well, what did he do? And he said, we said, show us what you did. And Ajani said, well, I did this to my friend. Interestingly, the non-culturally competent vice principal did not know in Codman Square in Dorchester that means I love you, right? He was suspended for doing that because they said in sign language that means the pejorative for someone who's mentally challenged. This young man now is in Boston Public Schools. And you know, Ajani's actually been invited to the White House 2 times, and he's been honored by First Lady Michelle Obama for the great work that he's doing in tutoring young people in music. So the other question here is, are we pushing out young Black and Latino students, and who are we actually keeping in these schools? So I think there's really something that we need to dig into relative to these issues around these draconian suspension rates. Some schools actually have 40% suspension. Roxbury Prep has 40% suspension rates, but they're down from 60% 2 years ago. The question is, are we actually doing the right thing by our students and actually embracing them and using the right disciplinary actions?
Good. Thank you, Tito. Natasha.
Thank you. I just want to start off with talking to Michael. Thank you so much for sharing your story.
You too.
I think that, as parents, it's very hard to come up here to talk about our children and to be very vulnerable in this situation. And I just want to applaud you. And I want to apologize also for something I didn't even do, but, just for the experience that your children had to go through. And I think that's the reason why I'm here today, is because Michael's right. We don't always get it right. In fact, in special ed, we're not doing great as a state. It's not just charter schools and district schools, it's Massachusetts schools, period. We have a lot of work to do. We have a lot of work to do, and if we want to spill out some data, in fact, we are only graduating probably about 50% of our students who are special ed students. So we're not doing a great job. And so I think this is where this conversation comes together, that we as a team, as educators, period, we need to work harder to teach our children. But I wanted to get back to a couple of things that were said earlier in terms of funding. Tito was correct that the state does give about $215 million to Boston Public Schools. And out of that, 175 goes to the charter schools. But what he didn't mention is that the Boston Public School budget is $1 billion. So I'm not a mathematician, I'm a sociologist, all right? So for those of you all who are good at math, do the numbers. What percentage of that is actually being taken away from the public school system? In fact, it's not being taken away at all, because charter schools are public schools. This money is not the school's money, it's the kids' money. The state did not earmark this money to say this is how it's going to be spent to educate our children. They said this is the money that it costs to educate our children, period. And so we have to think about that. This is not, this particular school's money or whatever. These are our children's money. In fact, this is our money. We pay the taxes. Okay? The other thing about the wait list is that I think maybe Tito may have a little bit of misinformation. Charter schools no longer keep the kids on wait lists forever. In fact, you have to drop the children off after a year. And so we have this wait list the data is actually current. It doesn't last forever and ever and ever. And then as far as choice, that's what we're talking about here, right? You said parents have chosen to choose for their children to go to district schools or charter schools. That's the whole conversation. We want to have a choice, right? Not all schools are great for all children. I don't know what this baby in here needs, okay? But if a charter school is not the best fit, then I want to be able to have a choice. Or if a district school is not the best fit, I want to be able to have a choice. That's all I'm asking for. And so I think that it's very important to understand that, yeah, Massachusetts is the best in the nation in terms of education. But if we look at our nation as a whole, we're not doing so great in education, period. This is a global economy. We are not competing against our neighbors down the street. We are competing against people around the world.
Okay. Thank you, Natasha. Michael?
Thank you. Yeah, just a couple of very quick points. We have a good friend who came over a couple of weeks ago, and she said that she got the strangest letter in the mail, and she didn't even remember entering her child's name in the lottery. Her son's going to 5th grade, and she had entered the lottery for kindergarten, and she just got the letter. So I don't know if all charter schools are abiding by the new regulations. Second point I wanted to make is I've never been very pro-union, truth be told. The first time I wondered whether a union was a valuable thing was when I sat in an IEP team meeting, and there were 12 people in the room. Most of them were members of the administration, and I had 2 teachers that I knew cared about my daughter. And I saw the assistant superintendent silence both of them. And if they'd been members of a union, they would have been protected. The second thing, there was a remark earlier about a couple of, it sounded like ragtag data artists out there who are parents. I have a data analysis background, and I've compiled some of the information from the mass.gov site, and I'd like to share some of these metrics with you. Whereas traditional public schools employ an average of 1 special education teacher per 22 students with disabilities, charter schools on average employ 1 per 38. Of the 36 school districts that report a special ed teacher FTE count of 0, 24 are charter schools. Suspension as a trapdoor. Of the 30 school districts out of the 410 who suspended disabled students at the highest rate, 25 are charter schools. For the 30 school districts in this data, we find that schools discipline children with disabilities at a rate that is disproportionate when compared to all students, approximately twice the rate. If you're disabled, you're twice as likely to be suspended. Of the top 20 schools showing discrepancy for indicator 4A, which is the use of suspension or expulsion for students with an IEP, 14 are charters. That means greater than 10 days in a school year. Of the 16 school districts with the highest special education attrition rate, 14 are charters. Of the 10 school districts with the highest special ed dropout rate, 7 are charters. And you can look the data up on mass.gov, as our friend indicated earlier.
Okay, again, thank you to our panelists. We offer you the opportunity. There are file cards and folks in the audience circulating with file cards. If you have a question, not a statement, but a question to put on a file card, please do so. They'll be passed forward, and we'll get to those in a moment. I'm now going to raise some questions in an open-ended kind of format for our panelists to respond to. The challenge for me is I've got so many questions here, and we've got so little time. So I'm going to ask the panelists to be as brief as possible, but we certainly want to get your views out. So let me start with sort of a roundhouse, a little bit easier question. I mentioned the multiple purposes of charter schools as specified in Massachusetts legislation earlier. Do you feel that charter schools have fulfilled their promise in Massachusetts?
Most definitely. They're fulfilling their promise. This is not done. We haven't perfected it yet. We have high-quality schools across the state. So, yes, we're fulfilling our mission of providing high-quality education, public education for our students. The other part of our mission is to be laboratories of best practice, which we are doing extensively, and our work is being shared all across the state. You only have to look at Lawrence to see how it's played out district-wide. And our other aspect of our mission is to provide healthy competition to public schools, districts, so as to create a catalyst for change. And we think we can look across the state and we can talk about where we see that happening, but we think that we are providing that catalyst for change with school districts in Boston and across the state. So the answer would be a resounding yes, which is why we need to vote yes on 2 and allow more charter schools too.
Okay.
So I don't believe charters have actually fulfilled their promise. I think that, first off, we need to understand that each charter is run as its own school district, right? So that's a very important piece. So this replication component is not necessarily, actually in Boston, we just closed a charter this past year. I think it's also critical to look at the types of students that they're actually serving. And it was in 2011 that the law literally had to be changed to force charters to take more English language learners as well as special education students. So that, I believe, is another issue. And for the students, the most vulnerable students, as Mike brought up, we still see a large attrition rate back to the Boston public schools with charter school students who've either been counseled out or pushed out or disciplined out. And I actually had to deal with a friend of mine who 1 week she was called 3 times, and these actually don't get counted as suspensions. She was called to the school from work 3 times in 1 week, and then 4 times in the next week. She's a single mom with 2 students. And what ended up happening is she pulled her child out and moved him over to the Boston public schools. I think the attrition component is a huge issue relative to charters. And the real piece is that charters should be there, and they were never there to replace public schools. This is supposed to be innovation. Legal's Test Kitchen is not trying to take over Legal's Seafood. The objective should be to figure out recipes that work and to scale them up. And as you can see, I am so hungry right now on this stage. But that is exactly what charters were supposed to do. This should not be a Royal Rumble. We should not bottle up the best in class and hide it and have secret sauce. We lose when all students don't have an opportunity to get the best education, and that's what this should be about. And it's not a charter or no charter debate. That's not what we're talking here. 12 new charters with no additional funding, meaning that the funding would come from districts. And this is the author right here. He chose not to put actual money in this. This is skirting the issue. $1 billion is the gap in actual funding on a year-to-year basis that we're underfunding. And those are Democrats and Republicans at the State House who came up with that. We are skirting these issues. Early education is an area that we, in the state of Massachusetts, spend less money on early education than we do on the Department of Corrections in the state of Massachusetts. We are fueling the school-to-prison pipeline and not dealing with the real issue. And by the way, this doesn't help current charters. Right? This doesn't help the charters who are here, we were speaking about earlier. This doesn't help the people who actually are in charters. And your school is underfunded also. You should be receiving additional funding for your child that's actually in the Brook Charter School.
Okay, let me shift to an accountability question. Maybe toss it out to Latasha or Michael here.
Wait, are we ready to move on from that question?
Well, I mean, if you have something that you
I
want to
had
add
something
to
as
that.
well.
I have something.
That's
I
a
had
big
something as
question,
well.
but there are lots of other ones we want to get to.
I can keep it pretty quick.
Okay.
You know, as I said earlier, when it comes down to accountability, you know, I've worked in a lot of places, and the first thing you define when you come up with an initiative is what the measures of success are. If you don't have those metrics in place from the get-go and have a model where you can reevaluate what those measures are over time, then you're going to have a failed model. Because everything changes. The world changes. And if you're not keeping pace of what's changing, then you can't change.
So let me raise this, because I was going to bring up an accountability question, and anybody can tackle it. But to what standards, what performance standards ought charter schools to be held accountable? Should they be the same as mainstream schools? If not, how should they be different? Should it be a higher standard of performance than we hold the typical mainstream school to, the same standard, or a lower standard?
I would say it should be the same. But the problem is you don't have the structures in place as you do have with traditional public schools.
The structures for holding people accountable?
There's a structure. Like I said earlier, I think there should be bidirectional communications with parents that are ongoing. I think if you're going to have a board, I think you need to have parent representation. I think you need to have community involvement. I think the problem right now, let me answer the question, are charter schools successful, with the following. The year that my wife lost her mother and her brother lay dying in the hospital in an induced coma of mitochondrial disease, and she was the health proxy. We got phone calls almost daily to come pick up our daughter because she was non-compliant. My daughter has paralysis tics because of her Tourette, and she can't walk. And they treated her like she was garbage. That is a measure of failure.
Okay, fair enough.
So I would disagree that the charter schools are not held accountable. I actually feel like they're held more accountable than the district schools. Kind of what Tito just alluded to earlier, that if a charter school is not working, they close the charter school. We have district schools that have been in existence for decades that have not been working. I have more level 3s in my level 3 schools in my neighborhood than I do level 1s. So I don't understand how anybody is saying that we're not holding charter schools accountable when we're not really holding public schools accountable. In fact, when public schools are underperforming, more money gets put into these schools so that they can get out of the hole, as opposed to when charter schools are not performing, they just close the school down. And I just wanted to just kind of share another story, a different side on the special ed issue. I'm going to keep this child nameless because actually their parent is in the room, but I have there's a Brooks Scholar that was a classmate in my child's class last year in the 3rd grade. And he struggled actually in public school, okay? He struggled not only academically, but socially. He was taunted all the time. He and his brother were, they couldn't make friends. It was a terrible situation. And I remember going to the rally and talking to his mother and just sitting there crying because I couldn't imagine this child going through this. Well, this child is now at Brooke, and he still struggled academically. And so last year, he was going to be retained. And his teacher said, she was going to move to the 4th grade with my son. And she said, I need to stay another year. And I said, why? She said, I have to help my baby. Like, this is my baby, and I know that if I stay with him one more year, he's going to get it. These are the stories that are not told, right? Just like Michael said, there are some teachers, and I never blame the teachers because I'm an educator, and I know it's very hard to teach, okay? We have wonderful teachers. But the systems are not in place to help our teachers, to support our parents, and that's the issue. You are correct. This is a funding issue. And that's why I don't even understand why we're fighting. We should not be fighting. We are not fighting each other. We should be fighting up, okay? We should be fighting the legislators because they do need to fund education. I teach in higher ed. I'm still waiting for funding in higher ed, okay? This is ridiculous, and I don't believe that this is a debate between charters and districts. It's an issue with our state. We are supposed to be the leaders and the pioneers of education. Well, put your money where your mouth is.
Exactly.
Let me pick up the funding strand of that. So the theory of action behind charter schools was that the money would follow the child. And the money follows the child to the school that provides the services. Massachusetts, as you know, reimburses districts over a period of time for that loss. A lot of people take issue with the way charter schools are funded. I guess what I'd throw out to the panel is, are you satisfied with the way the funding formula for charter schools operates in Massachusetts? If not, how would you improve upon it?
So the money does follow the child, but the cost doesn't. And so I think a good analogy, and I think we would have a 5-person family, would be a nice, happy family here. And Mike goes off to college. right? And Mike, you go, Mike, you do your thing. Mike goes off to college. You know what? Our mortgage is going to be the same. Our light bill is going to be the same. Our electric bill is going to be the same. So charters, yes, take 4% of the funding, but they don't take 4% of the cost. As we noted before, when it comes down to this, we are allowing our Republican governor, and he must be cheering right now as Democrats beat each other up. We are allowing our Republican governor and those folks at the State House, and this is where I agree with Latasha. She went to the finest high school in the state of Massachusetts. We both went to the same high school.
You're going to name it?
Brookline High. Okay, cool. Okay.
Brookline High,
But this is where we are actually skirting the problem, and this is, I don't believe this is really a ballot question. I believe this is a distraction for what the real problem is. We are $1 billion away from fully funding public education in the state of Massachusetts. And again, and the reason why, Latasha, this is an issue is because instead of putting forward a ballot question that actually had revenue or money attached to it, what we're doing here, by definition, is pitting communities against one another.
Yes.
I care about every single student, and people ask me, I don't have children of my own, but I have 70,000 young people in the city of Boston that are mine, and I care about the charter school students, current charter school students, the Catholic schools that will get killed by this. By the way, I've spoken to the leadership in the Archdiocese. They're going to get beat up by this, and this also would be catastrophic for districts across the state. And on the accountability side of things, only 5 charters in the past 25 years have had their charters revoked. How is it that this board in Malden can control every single school across the state of Massachusetts? We do not have the actual accountability that we need. And instead of fighting the fight, as Latasha brought up earlier, that is about early education and all of these other parameters about funding for everyone, this question 2 has us fighting each other, and that is unfair, unacceptable, and we actually need to step our game up.
Let me touch on the question of enrollment. So there's been various discussions about who charter schools serve and who they don't serve. Would you change or propose alterations in the way charter schools enroll children? Is that properly regulated? What would you do differently?
Could I just add one quick point to the financial conversation?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, I wanted to point out that there is a school finance regulation that requires that each school district utilize a financial accounting system that permits the reporting of all school district expenditures, and that's for all districts. Right. Part of the data analysis I did, I ran just about every report filtered for each different type of child. One thing that was interesting that I found is the per pupil expenditure information is not reported for charter schools. It is reported for all of the traditional public school districts and for vocational schools. The also is true for teacher salary, because I wanted to see whether teachers are fairly compensated at the charter schools, but I have no data to support that because it is not reported to the state for those schools.
Well, Michael, all our audits, our financial statements, everything is online. Everything is available. I'm sorry you couldn't find it, but it's all there. We are the most transparent schools that have ever been in the public sector in Massachusetts. So anything you want to know is out there, and you can get a hold of. So yes, there is variations in per pupil spending among different states, different cities across the state. There's different fluctuations in how much charter schools spend based on the different revenue they spend. It's all out there, so we get different amounts of money depending on which city we're in. And just so the per pupil is out there. So I guess I'm trying to get at sort of what your point is here, in that we're not accountable, we're not transparent, you can't find out what it is that we're doing. What is the point that you're trying to make here?
There is a lack of transparency. I am aware that there's some carryover that's permitted, some operational carryover.
That's right.
Which is permitted for charter schools, but not permitted for traditional public
schools. And it should be. That is something that should be a district. School districts should have the right to carry over excess funds.
So
that's an innovation. That's an innovation that we do.
In the meantime, in the interest of transparency, I would love to see if any of those funds are being invested and where they're being invested, to confirm that nobody on any of these boards of directors many of whom are from financial services organizations, that there are no conflicts of interest.
It's all
That should be public information.
Every board member signs a conflict of information form, just like every school committee member. It's exactly the same process, Michael. You're throwing darts at us that don't have any validity in there.
Why
All
isn't
right,
the
let me
okay.
change from
That's
the
fine.
technicalities of finance to a slightly broader question, which is this question of enrollment. Who charter schools serve? Are they serving an appropriate proportion of the population? There have been various issues raised about who they're serving and who they should be serving. I want to open the floor for comments on that topic.
I think they're serving every child that enters the lottery is chosen. They're serving every child. So I know what Tito may say is that Boston serves 30% ELL students, and I'm not sure the percentage of special ed students, right? And charters have a lower number, which is correct. But it's not a question of if we are choosing to pick, if we're cherry picking these students. That's not actually what's happening. What's happening is the methodology is different, okay? So charters, there's a lottery. The lottery was created to make sure that the system was fair. If a parent enrolls or participates in the lottery, the child is chosen from the lottery. We have no control over if this child that is chosen is an ELL student, is a special ed student. We have no control over those things. I do know, however, that there have been measures put in place to do more recruitment so that parents who may not know about charters are able to get this information so that they do have opportunities to enroll their students or try to get their students into the lottery. But we can't compare apples to oranges. We can't compare the way that children are enrolled in district schools to the way that children are enrolled in lottery, in the charter schools.
The provision that she's referring to actually was Secretary Revel helped in the 2011 law, which was not about forcing charter schools to do better around special ed and ELL. It was about giving us tools to do better. So the most important thing that we've been asking for years was the ability to be able to contact all the parents in the district with information about our schools. How are you going to hit the hardest need kids if you can't talk to everybody in the district? So now charter schools, as a result of the law that Secretary Revel helped draft, requires the district to allow us to mail enrollment information to every student in the district for the grades that we have available. So everybody has information. And what's happened in the last 5 years since that is our numbers for special education and English language learners particularly, who are the hardest to reach, are going up. Because when you're in Boston or other communities, when people come into the city, they're immigrants, new immigrants to the city, they come to the places the city sets up to integrate them in the city, there's no information about charter schools. And then we get blasted because those kids can't get into our schools. So now we're trying to figure out every possible way for us to reach those students. And so there's this critique of us that we don't have enough ELL students, is that we're working against a lottery system that makes it, as Latasha says, we can't choose between students. We can't say we're only going to take ELL students. All we can do is try to beef up the numbers in our lottery of those students and make them more comparable to the district. And if you look at the data, you see that is working. It's not as fast as any of us would like. The immigrant populations in our cities in this country, in this state, are growing quickly, and we're not keeping up fast enough. And we want to do better. And we hope that this law and this ballot question will help provide more opportunities we can provide for new families that are coming into the state, which is why I think the Hispanic and Latina population is ranking us or is so supportive of this ballot question.
Okay, let's get some rebuttal from the other side, and then we're going to go to audience questions.
So just point number one, when we say when we say our charter schools serving the appropriate populations, I'm not sure we're talking about enrollment. I think we're talking about how we're supporting the students once they are enrolled. And there are key metrics you can look at in terms of, percentage of ELL, the ratio of teacher to student ratios. Another thing I'd like to point out is, we're talking about, not serving the students because we can't market, is basically what you just described. I will say that on mass.gov, the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education has wonderful resources where you can find information about every public school district, whether it's traditional or whether it's charter.
And I would simply say just some real data points. In Boston, the district has 29.8 29.8% English language learners and 12.4% in charters. When we look at the state as a whole, 24.5% English language learners in district, 11.6 in charters. And and what we've seen is increases in English language learners in charters in Boston, but we've only seen them in 3 schools. So those increases, I can't say only, primarily seen them in 3 schools. And then let's also just talk about simply, we're talking about testing and that type of accountability. Let's talk about what happens after they get out of school, because I don't think people ask when you're in business what your SAT score was. So let's talk about persistence. Persistence is after you graduate high school, 6 years out, of the students who went to college, what percentage of those students actually graduated? When we look at persistence rates for charter schools, 42% of charter school students graduated over the course of 4 years. This is the class of 2000, I'm sorry, over the course of 6 years. This is the class of 2007. Interestingly, 50% of students from Boston Public Schools graduated in that same time frame. So we also should be thinking about what actually happens in that space. And I hear some people speaking about exam schools. So let's actually disaggregate that data and talk about what happens if we take out exam schools. But by the way, exam schools are part of the city of Boston, and they actually educate 1/3 of our high school students. In addition, so when we look at the exam school side, it's 44% for charter schools, I'm sorry, 44% for charter schools and 43% for public schools. So when it comes down to it, the question really is, are charters getting young people into college and out of college at the same rate of Boston Public Schools? And that's actually not the case right now. Boston Public Schools are still doing a great job with the most vulnerable populations in the city of Boston.
So Wood, Harvard, Tito, do you know how many, the pool, the N of students that we've had graduate from high schools in Boston in that period of time, the number you're talking about? Our schools are still very young in terms of high schools, so the number is actually quite small. But even though that number is small, we're still showing, these very, very young schools are showing equal or better college persistence than BPS schools.
Okay, we want to go to some of the questions that have come in from the audience, because we've got a lot of good questions. We can't get to all of them. With the help of my colleague Jennifer Davis, we've been able to sort of consolidate some of those. So let me ask a more collaborative kind of question for a moment. What can be done to improve school well, that wasn't the right one. What can be done to encourage more collaboration between charter and district schools? Again, taking back to the original purpose, part of the purpose was innovation. We talked about test kitchen, laboratory, bringing best practices from one to the other. What can we do to enhance that?
Let's take a lesson from manufacturing, who would have a research and development division where they're making investments and they're monitoring, and beforehand they're identifying what the measures of success are. And they're closely monitoring these. And by the way, they're making sure the lamp doesn't blow up in the process. But then when things go well, they come back with it. Things don't go well, okay, well, we have to tweak that a little bit.
Michael, is there an audience in the mainstream public school system for innovations that are developed in charter schools?
I can tell you that the local district that I'm working with at home has been open to every single conversation I've ever had with them. I'm not sure if that's true everywhere. I certainly hope it is. Like I said, I come from a family of educators, and I know that everyone in my family would certainly be open to a conversation.
And charters are not the only ones who are innovating. Let's look at the two-way bilingual schools, like the Margarita Muniz High School, which is a two-way bilingual high school that students come in and are fluent in Spanish. Let's look at the Hurley School. And again, Boston International, that has 86% of the students who are actually English language learners, and they have just been moved to a level 1 school. Other schools have had extended school days. So we also should understand that innovation goes both ways. It's not only that charters are innovating, there are innovations that are happening across district schools that serve 96% of the students throughout the state of Massachusetts. Massachusetts, and that's why we're number one. And we do agree that the other collaboration that we should have, and I would ask my friends at the Charter School Association, we should be getting together to go to the State House and ask for more money for the current charter schools that currently exist, and demanding that we fully fund all public schools, which is the right way. We can't have winners and losers in the state of Massachusetts because we are a knowledge-based economy.
So
we
I tell
don't
you
have
what,
oil. So are you going to go to the State House with
I'm
me,
down
brother?
with you. So let's
Okay, great.
Here's the deal,
I'll
Tito.
drive.
Here's the
We
deal.
have agreement.
We've accomplished something.
Tito, no, I'm serious, Tito. This is what I propose to you. So we have a ballot question right now around to increase school choice options for parents, particularly in our lowest 25% performing districts. That's what this charter school ballot question does. It lifts more schools in low-performing districts. 2 years from now, there's going to be a ballot question on the ballot, the millionaire's tax, which is going to raise the taxes on the wealthy and earmark that money. Whoops, I'm making a big pitch here and I'm losing my microphone. That the millionaire's tax is going to generate over $500 million, supposedly, for public education and for transportation. And that will help fund the entire system. So Tito, if you can get on board with this ballot question to help support choice, we will be there in 2 years to help get more money for everyone in the state.
So Mark, stop taking money out of our pockets. So it's okay to take money out of the pockets of millionaires. It's not okay to take money out of pockets of poor Black and Latino students who need those resources.
Well,
you wrote this. You wrote this.
Well,
you could have put a funding mechanism in there. You are the author. You are the person who wrote this. So when it comes down to this, I don't understand why you would want to take away resources, not only from the worst public schools that we have, and we have some bad ones in Boston, but from the best. And at Boston Latin School, they don't have science in eighth grade. And they don't have science in 8th grade because they can't afford it. That is a huge issue. And by the way, we take the MCAS in 8th grade in the state of Massachusetts. That is one of our best public schools, and they do not have the resources that they actually need. You should have written a ballot question that did not pit people against one another, but actually allowed us to come together. As the author, I ask you, my question is, why would you have a ballot question that would take from districts rather than add more resources and put those people on notice at the State House that they've been too stingy with the public education in the state of Massachusetts?
Let me, if I can, interject here a bit as somebody who's spent a fair amount of time at the State House. One of the voices we don't have on our panel is the taxpayers. Taxpayers aren't represented. So a taxpayer voice. I know we all, unlike certain presidential candidates, we all pay our taxes.
Exactly.
But setting that aside for the moment, a taxpayer might look at this proposition that you seem to be making, Tito, is that we should pay the existing school system the way we currently pay it for that student who's enrolled there and pay the charter school at the same time and say, well, aren't we double paying for that student? What do you say to that?
Well, we're not double paying for the student. Understand, when you actually push for district public schools to get more money, charter schools get more money. Their formula is based on a percentage of, and I got a shake of the head right here. It's based on a percentage of the dollars that they get. That we get at the district level. So by supporting district schools, which this doesn't, and you should vote no on question 2 because it doesn't support district schools. By supporting district schools, you actually help the current existing charter schools. This takes away and provides not only competition to the district schools, but it also takes away and provides competition to the current charter schools that are underfunded. Charter schools have to raise about $50 million every 4 years for them and actually that's all of the charters as a whole, $50 million over a 4-year time frame to keep the doors open. They don't have enough funding either. So we should be looking at funding for everybody versus taking money away from the district public schools that in Boston serve over 4,000 homeless students.
All right, let me shift. One Latasha, and then we're going to change gears.
So just to kind of answer your question about collaboration, it's time to start listening to the parents. So I was a part of an organization that I'm a part of an organization that supports both district and charter schools, and we rallied. We went to the State House. We gave proposals. We came up with initiatives. We did a lot of work to kind of, bring some peace in this debate. No one listened to us. Not one person listened to us, okay? So we're the taxpayers. We're the ones who elect these people to make these decisions, and they didn't do their job. Why aren't we mad at them? This was supposed to be the state legislator's job, not ours. This is not fair to have a fight against the haves and the have versus the have and the have-nots, right? Some districts, this is not a problem for them. Brookline, this is not a problem for them, Warriors. Newton, this is not a problem for them. But in my neighborhood, this is a problem. And so we are upset at the wrong people, okay?
Fair enough.
And I just think that we need to listen to the parents. And if we listen to the parents and we will have more collaboration because we know what's best for our children.
Fair enough. Okay, we're running out of time. We've got hundreds of questions here. We're only getting to a few. I did raise earlier, so I want to come back to it, this discipline issue. A couple of you have raised the point about school discipline, so I'm wondering, as you think about school discipline policy and charter schools, what would you propose doing differently? Tito, I think you raised this question.
Yes, I did. Restorative justice is something that charter schools should be adopting. It is, in the city of Boston, we actually have a school called the McKinley School. So if you bring a knife, a gun, or you have some severe social emotional issues, you go to the McKinley School. It has a 14% suspension rate. There are charters that in Boston have a 40% out of school suspension rate. And if you cross-tab that and you actually look at what do they do for Black and Latino males in those schools? They're pushing these young people out. And not only are they pushing them and counseling them out, they're breaking their spirits, right? And that's the problem that I have in those situations. And there's a program for students who are almost about to drop out, and it's at Charlestown High School. It's called Diploma Plus. I went there, and they had there were about 20 young people. They do a circle every morning. And it's a restorative justice circle. So, Paul, if you and I had a problem, we don't, but if you and I had a problem, we would address it as an issue with our community. About 4 of those students had come from charters. And so we can't, it's not that we're not only failing the students at the charter, but it also hurts their spirit. And that, to me, is one of the other issues that we need to deal with. We should have, and you helped pass 222, which says that you're actually supposed to have students in school. We cannot have these draconian measures in terms of pushing young people out of school. One of the students I spoke to was from the Brook. He had been suspended 17 times from the Brook from September to December. One time for wearing pink socks. Another time for not having a belt. This young person showed up for school. And by the way, if he hadn't shown up for 8 days, he's considered truant. What should the school be considered if they push this young person out of school 17 days? That is not right.
Okay. Paul, we have let me get the other side respond here because we're running out of time, Michael.
I don't know if you want to. Well, okay, yes, disciplinary actions or measures, that's true for both sides. And I think the difference is that some schools are more transparent than others. There's a lot of pushing kids around in the district schools that nobody knows about. There's a lot of rotating them to different schools, text messages that, as a social worker, I have received that said, please do not send your child back to the school. Okay? I have received it. Okay. Right? And we also know that the Boston Public Schools has the Counseling Intervention Center. So no, they don't send them out of the school, but they send them to this place that's supposed to provide counseling. Counseling. That's all I have to say.
Okay.
I want to point out, so the proof is in the pudding.
Just quickly, Mike.
So all public districts report the disciplinary information. I gave you guys some pretty good stats on what it looks like to be a child with a disability at a charter school who's being disciplined. And it's an important distinction, discipline versus punishment. When you have a child who acts a little bit differently like my son does, and you move his chair 10 feet away from all the other students and tape a perimeter on the floor around his desk, that's punishment.
Okay. We're nearing the end of our time. I want to raise one sort of final concluding question with our panelists. And then we'll take a look at how the results, if you want to sort of call in your after the debate perspective, that would be fine to do that now. But the last question I would like to ask you is, if your particular position on this loses, where do you go from here?
I keep fighting because I'm about education. I'm about quality education regardless. So the fight doesn't stop because we voted no and whatever. The fight continues, and we just press harder and harder. And I'm definitely fighting my state legislators because this is their issue. I've elected them. We are paying them to do this, and they need to figure it out. We are at a point in our lives where we're talking about the future of our children. And we know that education provides that future. We know that it increased life chances. This is absolutely ridiculous that the adults are sitting here arguing about what education system. We just need a better education system in general. And so I'll keep fighting.
And as a fellow Brookline warrior, I will also continue to fight. We can't afford to lose in the state of Massachusetts. We are a knowledge-based economy. This week, I put forward legislation in the city of Boston to create a K through 12 computer science component to education in the city of Boston. We should be sharing and actually fighting at the state level for more resources for the schools that already exist, not transferring resources out of schools that already exist. Understand, this is the first time in history that we've done this. Transferring resources out of schools that already exist and moving them to schools that don't actually exist. We have young people across the state of Massachusetts. 96% of the young people in the state of Massachusetts are in district public schools. We should support those public schools. We should elevate those public schools. We should share best practices, and we should continue to do right by every single student, not only 4% of the population of the state of Massachusetts. And I will continue to fight, and I pledge, and we should go up to the State House together and get that $1 billion, my brother.
I just want to say, I'm all for adding new restaurants to my neighborhood, but if they don't have to go through the Board of Health, I might be a little questioning about whether we should allow them to establish or not. I think we need to do a better job looking at the accountability of each of these individual institutions, monitor them, absolutely take away the best practices, and implement those in our local districts. But we also have to have accountability, and we need to make sure that we're keeping an eye out for the kids that need help.
Okay, Mark, you get the last word.
This is an amazing moment in Massachusetts political history. Those of us who are involved in education as a lifelong struggle don't get many opportunities in their lifetime to make significant change. For better or for worse, this is an opportunity to make significant change in how we think about public schools, particularly for our lowest income and minority students. We are going to have a spirited debate over the next 6 weeks about the future of our schools and the future of education for our most needy students. But what Paul's saying, what Tasha's saying, and what Tito's saying is that after that's over on November 9th, we will all still get up and start and keep fighting the good fight. Together, separately, different coalitions, and we'll be fighting for all public education, which is what we're doing right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Feel free to vote your conscience here on where you think this issue should go, and those results will keep tallying as we're talking just for a few more minutes. I'm told that if we've achieved nothing else, we've achieved a kind of first place status on Twitter here, neck and neck with David Ortiz in terms of the energy that's being generated in this room. So congratulations to you for that. I want to just say in conclusion, we've had a spirited discussion this evening over the issue of public policy about which we all care deeply, no matter how we feel about this particular issue. In the end, people can agree to disagree on matters like charter schools and lifting the cap. But when all is said and done, it's in our interest, the interest of our field, of our sector, and especially in our children's interest, that cap lift or not, we figure out how to heal our divided field and move forward united and strong to stand up for children and a better, more equitable education system and a more socially just society. And I know all of us in this room are committed to that result. So please join me in thanking our panelists for being with us this evening. Thank you all for joining us. We very much appreciate your participation in this issue. Thank you. Thank you, Tito.